A lot of things that happen in town can happen as of right, and if you want to build something on a piece of property that you own and you're in conformance with certain things, you just go to the building department and you get a building permit. But oftentimes properties may not be in conformance, and there are some either exceptions or changes that need to be made, or that you have a large piece of land and you want to subdivide it and put a small development on it. And the two things that the planning board oversees more than anything else are subdivision regulations, which is how land is subdivided for really both commercial and residential, but in this town it's mostly residential, and zoning. And for example, this past year, under Eileen's guidance, we revised a significant amount of the zoning code for the town of Newbury to make it more easily understandable for developers and for the neighborhood people to do that. Mm-hmm. And John O'Connell, at the end, just significantly rewrote our subdivision regulations, again, to make them more understandable to developers and to the community. And also something which is important for this town, which is stormwater regulations, because of all of our wetlands and all of our salt marsh areas, and so those have been rewritten as well. And so we have done those kinds of things. Those are the day-to-day kind of pragmatic things. On a broader scale, the planning board was responsible for creating the master plan, which was adopted by the town in 2006. And in fact, some of us are right now in the process of reviewing that to see to what extent that needs to be updated or changed. Some of the things that we've talked about that we think automatically need to be looked at, for example, are the issue of sea level rise, which wasn't at all contemplated in 2004 when the research for that was being done. But now is, we think, an important issue. And plus there's many other things that we're probably going to get involved with. But as you heard in what we talked about on our agenda tonight, we're looking at medical marijuana and where a facility might be permitted to be located. Not that it would be located, because we haven't had any demand for one yet, but we're obligated to come up with a plan and a recommendation to the town about where we think such a facility could be located. One of the more other interesting things that we did in our past session was, and again it was written by board members and Martha, was the whole issue of solar photovoltaic arrays, which came because of the proposal out on Scotland Road. And so we're involved in things that are both contemporary and interesting issues and longer range kinds of planning.
So how is the board elected, or is it how is it formed? And the other thing is how does it coincide with like the selectmen and the other boards in the town?
She's the top vote getter right here. No, I don't know if she is or not, but it's an elected board.
5 years.
5 years. Right.
5-year terms, and every year one member is up.
Okay.
And then on top of that, we have an alternate. Is it an alternate? It's
Associate
member.
Associate member,
Which is George.
And
right
that's,
now.
I'm appointed by the selectmen.
but he's appointed by the selectmen upon the planning board's recommendation.
Okay. So how do you guys work with? Because I know with the solar on Scotland Road, I know that you guys approved stuff, and then I went to this, like you guys kind of did, if I remember correctly, you guys
That didn't come to us.
didn't come to you guys.
Didn't come to us, but we.
It had something, right?
There were no regulations.
Okay.
What we did is we wrote the regulations and then took them to town meeting, and they were approved at town meeting in the spring.
Okay.
Before for the application, though, you probably did see the members of the board at the meeting for the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
And that's what you're thinking.
Okay. Cool. So what else? So is you guys like what would people come here for say? The they violate, like say something like wetlands. Is this like some
No.
anything
No,
like
that would be
that?
the
That's the conservation.
Okay.
conservation.
So what other type of issues? So it's like it's like if someone wants to build something or somebody
No,
wants
so the
to.
most common thing is usually is if someone has a piece of property
Mhm.
and they want to subdivide it. They might want to make it into one lot, or they might want to make a subdivision.
Yep.
That's the most common.
Okay. So you guys are almost there to make sure that they do everything legally and
Yeah.
in the right order and everything, right?
Well,
In
there's
many
two
cases,
processes.
the town takes over the roads after the road and the subdivision is built. So part of our job is specking the kind of road they must build and seeing to it that that's exactly what they do. So one of our functions is seeing that the infrastructure of the town, as the town grows, is appropriate.
Okay.
And that's defined by our subdivision regulations.
Right.
So we have, like you have, someone takes a piece of property and they want to divide it as approval not required, an A&R. That's basically, we're just making sure they meet their criteria defined by the state. But if they want to make a road and subdivide it to a subdivision, then they follow our bylaws
Okay.
in town. And then that's where it comes to us, and we're going through the review.
Right, and just as an addendum to that, all of this process has to follow Mass General Law. The subdivision rules and regs are based on that as well, and the approval not required process.
So what's your role in the town? Because I know you're in the town hall every day, but you work hand in hand with the planning board. So how does your position, like how does that work in the town?
Well, I'm the town planner, and so my primary responsibility is really working with the planning board. I'm the point person. If somebody wants to come in and say, submit an application for division of land, whether it's an approval not required or a subdivision, the board is also responsible for site plan review approval and for certain special permits. So for any of those applications, I'm the point person, and I'll review the application, make sure it's complete, sort of guide the applicant through the process, up to the point of getting it to the board. I'll review, make comments, coordinate with our engineer, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I also get involved in, John was mentioning drafting zoning. I'll do research on that, or
Explain to him how that comes about.
what, zoning?
So yeah,
Zoning
so that's how we
changes?
spend another majority of our times on zoning. So explain the zoning changes in this.
Um,
Just they don't know.
Well,
There
we
was-
have a zoning bylaw in town, which covers all kinds of things. I'm kind of
Right.
blanking out on that. But if there's going to be a change to the zoning bylaw, that change can either be initiated by the planning board, or it could be initiated outside, but it would still need to come to the planning board to go through a public hearing process. It's another process that's outlined very strictly under Mass General Law. To get it to town meeting, there has to be a public hearing. It has to follow a very strict timetable. Then it has to be submitted to the Attorney General for approval. As an example, we're working on revising the site plan review bylaw right now. As John mentioned, we're doing medical marijuana. We've done the solar bylaw, wind turbines. So some of them are new bylaws responding to issues that we see are coming to town. Some are revisions of existing bylaws, such as accessory apartments, where we feel that there's improvements that can be made.
An important point is though the town votes on them to approve them.
At
The
town meeting.
planning board doesn't just say we're going to have this bylaw and it goes in effect. It actually has to be voted on and approved by the town.
Yeah, because it wouldn't with solar. You guys didn't have something to work off of, or something. Like the town didn't have anything to work
No
off.
bylaw.
So you guys created that and then brought it to town meeting and had it voted on. Correct?
Right.
Okay. So what goes into making a bylaw or something like that? Is it you kind of go off of what other towns do, or
Research.
David,
Since David did a lot of that.
Right. Basically, one of the things we've done is to, over the last 5 to 6 years, I've been on the planning board, I think 7 now, is to look at a lot of the existing bylaws that we had in relation to when they were actually put together, and in many cases they not only had gotten somewhat out of date, the town had changed, also we had experience in terms of how well they worked or they didn't work, and we passed a rather innovative bylaw back in 2001 or 2 called the Open Space Residential Development Bylaw, which basically set up a situation where you could conserve 50% or more of a property, and therefore you could essentially build much more densely because you didn't have to have 1 acre building lots, etc. That bylaw had been written, and we had at least two, one fairly major development in town. But it turned out that the bylaw was very difficult to understand because, for example, it would refer to things that were not yet appearing in the bylaw. In section 1 you get a reference to section 10, let's say. And so one of the things that I did was to sit down and essentially not rewrite it but revise it, and we hope put it into a format so that it's a bit more understandable, and also so that if we do make changes in the procedures, we don't have to go to town meeting every time we want to change a single paragraph. We can do the changing of rules and regulations by having a public hearing at this level, meaning a board. Whereas a major bylaw, like the one we're considering, like just now, the medical marijuana bylaw proposed, is one that we will have to do a fair amount of research on. And part of that comes looking at what neighboring communities are doing. Part of that also comes from what we know the state will require, because there will be some things that the state, particularly I think in this case the Board of Health, State Board of Health,
Right.
will have some say in what we do.
Public Health.
So what we I think as a board do is we both reflect the state in which we live and also the town in which we live. And I hope we respond to changes in the community which have happened over time, which again probably connects to the other thing we talked about tonight, which was the demolition delay, which is the whole idea that we have some very historic houses and other kinds of structures in the community which we would not want to see pulled down overnight without someone at least saying they were going to do it, and asking the community essentially whether they want that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right.
John has one more thing.
All right, cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah. One other part of our function is to obviously work with other boards. John, for example, our chair, is the liaison between the planning board and the board of selectmen. Linda McCamick, who is not here tonight, is a liaison with the zoning board of appeals, and you'll be talking with them eventually, I'm sure. And she tries to keep us up to date with what they're up to and what their issues are. I'm the liaison with the Conservation Commission. I'm on the Concon.
And David
And
does.
David does.
Oh, David, yeah. David,
Merrimack Valley
Merrimack
Planning
Valley
Commission.
Planning
Yeah.
Commission.
I'm the person who represents this town and this board on the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, which is, well, I can never remember whether it's 17 or 18 communities which stretch from Newburyport and Newbury all the way to Lawrence and Andover. And they have an office in Haverhill, and we meet once a month about 8 times a year, and basically concern ourselves with transportation, economic development, those kinds of issues. And also, since we, Newbury, are a small community, and we're very lucky actually to have insisted in the past on affording a professional planner. Many small communities don't have a full-time planner, we do. But in addition, we often have to do things for which our resources are really not adequate in terms of, let's say, either equipment or expertise, and we can get that kind of help from the Regional Planning Commission, which is both a regional agency and also a state agency as well.
Okay.
And we pay dues to them, do we not, Dave? as a
Yes, but
town?
it's
And
very-
that finances the free consulting. fees
Right.
And the free
I mean,
miscellaneous
we
fees.
actually pay a
Minimum, right? It's like $5,000.
ridiculous.
$2,200.
Yeah, I mean, it's cents per head. If there are 6,600 of us, and it's $2,200, you can do the math, and I think it works
That's
out
about
to
30
be,
cents a head.
yeah, 30 cents. I mean, and frankly, the return on the dollar is very good in our experience. We, for example, had major help with data and writing of the master plan that we did several years ago, because the environmental section requires the kind of expertise that we don't have as a community, frankly.
They also they prepare assessors maps.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
we have access to a information database called MyMap, which has our maps on it, as well as links to our assessors' data and things like that, which are invaluable planning tools.